Hello, hello, and welcome back to Shelf Talks, the podcast where we dive deep into the journey of female founders bringing their product-based businesses to retail shelves. I'm your host, Roberta, and today we're joined by Olivia Abrams, the brilliant co-founder behind TiCK MiTT, the innovative on-the-go solution transforming how families protect themselves from ticks and insect-borne threats. She and her co-founder, which is her dad, didn't just create a product, they're building peace of mind for anyone who loves the outdoors. Welcome, Olivia.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited for you to be here and, of course, to hear your story and your
We've
journey.
got lots to talk about.
Good, exciting. So let's just dive in. So, can you tell us a little bit about what was life like before starting TiCK MiTT?
Yeah, so I grew up in New York City, but spent a lot of my childhood in upstate New York, which is where I really experienced a lot of the tick problems that we'll talk about later. But I started my company at a really young age. As we were saying right before this, I went to Lehigh University in Pennsylvania, graduated from there in 2021, moved back to New York City, and was working in finance for a couple of years. I was really just an average, like early 20s-year-old girl trying to figure out what to do with her life, had figured out that TiCK MiTT was maybe something that I had wanted to do back when I was in college, but wasn't really sure when there was the right time. And obviously we were all coming out of COVID when I was graduating too. And so I was just like a 20-year-old girl in New York City trying to figure out, do I want to stay in corporate life? Do I want to do my own thing? Is now a good time? Is there ever a good time?
Right.
And work changing from, a traditional 9 to 5 to now running my own thing, which is in some ways 24/7, but definitely can be, working when you want to work.
Yeah. So, working in finance, what really gave you the spark to say, you know what, I'm really going to start to pursue what was kind of in my head and didn't know if it was the right time or not?
Yeah, I think there were a couple of factors. So TiCK MiTT was something that my family and I had been thinking about doing for a very long time, probably since I was in high school. I went to college intentionally wanting to be an entrepreneur one day. I studied entrepreneurship, politics, and
Okay.
marketing in school, and even came up with a business plan of, if we were to launch TiCK MiTT, this is what our first 6 months would look like. But I was graduating, shortly after the pandemic. And our product is really for people spending time outside, which is not what people were doing in
Right.
2021. So I
Right.
figured, everyone was getting a dog, but they weren't really taking their dog anywhere past their backyards. And so I also feel like, it was a scary time for everyone. This was also like a health and wellness focused product. There was a lot going on in the economy. I just didn't feel like I felt right for it, nor did the world feel right for it yet. And I had a really great job offer to join Morgan Stanley after college. I had interned there my junior summer. And so I ended up going there. And then I went to a smaller venture capital firm after that, where I feel like I did learn a lot about what it's really like launching a startup, having startup founders in our office every single day. But as time went on, I just couldn't get TiCK MiTT out of my head. And I felt like the world was getting a little bit more acclimated to what we needed them to be at, which was kind of a pre-pandemic thought process. But also what I was seeing is, the outdoor market was starting to go back up again. The pet market had boomed during COVID. And now,
Mhm.
after a pandemic, there is a whole new level of approach to health and wellness living. And so I
Yeah.
kind of felt like all of these factors of like me not really wanting to be at a 9 to 5 anymore, and also so many industry factors that were happening at the right time that felt like it was, appropriate to take that leap. I had already done all of the foundational work.
So with that, had you already even had a prototype even before then, or was it
Yeah,
still just
so
on paper?
we had been prototyping on and off for multiple years while I was in college as like kind of a fun side gig. As I said, came up with a business plan when I was in school. Before I had quit my job in venture capital, we had set up our first photo shoot. We had like got our handles on social media. We started creating our website, and then we officially launched like a couple months after I quit.
Wow, so you were all in. You quit your job
Yeah,
to go in all in.
I quit my job. Yeah.
So you had an actual product. You said it's the time. It seems like within the environment and what was happening in the industry that it was right. how did you get an actual manufacturer to create your product based on your prototype?
Yeah, so I had a friend of a friend who owned a pretty famous sock company. He created socks for young children with disabilities who had difficult time getting their socks on. And so he had been manufacturing socks in China for so long, and he had recommended a manufacturer to us who did all of our prototyping. So by the time we actually put our first purchase order in, we had already had a multi-year relationship with this manufacturer.
Oh, nice. So then what did launch look like?
Yeah, I think that looking back, I might have changed what I had done originally when we launched. I think that nowadays there is such a big emphasis on building in public, having, the founder be the face of the brand and the creator. And in some ways, I feel like we did do that. We really emphasize, this is a mission that is close to our family's heart. We did, some of that kind of marketing on social media, but I feel like we launched on our website, we launched on social media. I wish that we had done a little bit more in-person events at the time, really getting that customer feedback. I think it took us a few months after launch to really get ourselves out in the field and get more feedback right in the beginning, because we had gotten so much research and data and spoken to people that we knew about the product beforehand and felt like, this is incredibly necessary. But I feel like we really started to shift our business when we started to go out in the world to a pet day, a weekend event, or to like a lawn and garden expo where there's opportunity to sell direct to consumer and have that touch point rather than just an online experience, because it allowed us to better understand how those customers wanted to be marketed to. What could I say to them that would make them understand the product better? What questions did they ask? And once I did that, I was able to better tailor what was on our website, what was on our social.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that would have been great. I hear you in regards to like showcasing as you're building, because
Yeah.
it sounds like you did such great work in building up to understand like what the timing was, what the, how the, to your point, how it was affecting your family, like showcasing that is what people are looking for
Yeah.
today. So,
But in early 2023, I don't think that was normal. I think there was a lot more emphasis on like aesthetically beautiful Instagram. I mean, TikTok was a thing, but I didn't really feel like brands lived there at the time. It was more of like an influencer creator platform. Things were definitely different than they were now, but um I wish I had been earlier to that trend.
yeah, yeah. So as you were getting out into those in real life experiences with consumers, what were some things that they were saying that you took back and changed the way you were delivering through your social media and your website?
So I could tell you a little bit about our product first so everyone can understand how it
Yeah.
works. So we have a glove called TiCK MiTT. It is a chemical-free glove that you simply rub on your skin, your clothes, your pet's fur after you've been outside. So the point of doing this is to, one, prevent ticks from biting you, because once they bite you, that's when you're actually likely to get a disease. So if they're just crawling on you, you're safe. Another thing about it is keeping ticks out of your home and out of your car. So that was one of the biggest things for us. And I think what consumers didn't understand in our initial messaging is that our society as a whole is very reactive in our approach to health. So, for example, I assume that you get a headache, you take Advil, and now everything's fine. And you're not maybe going to the doctor and saying, like, well, you're definitely not drinking enough water, or you're not getting this nutrient, and looking at root cause, or changing your behavior necessarily to prevent yourself from getting headaches in the future. It's the same thing with tick checks. So people go outside all day, they don't check themselves for ticks, they get Lyme disease, and now they're having to take antibiotics, find the right doctor, rather than just attempting to prevent the ticks in the first place. And so I think that was a huge portion of our messaging, is like, it's so easy to get Lyme disease, and the best way to prevent yourself from getting it is to do tick checks. And I think that in some ways we got on this bandwagon at a really good time, because over the last couple of years, ticks and Lyme disease and other tick-borne diseases are making every major news headline. And unfortunately, I think that problem is just going to continue.
Was it difficult to get consumers to kind of change their mindset in regards to what you're saying, like be preventative versus kind of getting the solve after you actually have, the disease or any sort of challenges from ticks?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. I do think there are some people who do perform tick checks, and to them, this was just simply an easier tool. I think what really has worked for us, unfortunately, is a little bit of fear mongering on social media. And so, what happens is we will get videos either from people we know, from UGC creators, from customers who will send us a video of them wiping down themselves or their dog and then finding 9 to 10 ticks on the dog. And so people are now seeing the ticks in a way that they've never seen it before. Because typically, if you're checking yourself, like maybe you'll find one here and then you'll find, one on your leg later. And then you have other ticks in your house that you've never seen. Or maybe you don't see a tick on you at all. But if you can see that someone can easily pull 10 ticks off of their dog, it kind of shoves the problem in their face a little bit more and gets them to realize, oh, I should actually be careful because this is happening, not that far from me, or, I have the same breed as dog as that person. And so I think being able to show someone, not just explaining the problem, but show them the solution to a problem that they didn't necessarily knew they had to be worried about in the first place, I think has been really helpful and has allowed us to go viral on social media many times.
As you were launching and getting awareness and drive out there, was that one of the main platforms in which you kind of got sales and got consumers to take notice, was really showing videos like that?
Yeah, I think we really started to see huge growth in our business when we started going viral on social media and then coupling that with in-person trade shows in an attempt to start getting into retail. Also doing some of those trade show calls myself and going to the stores in my area and creating relationships with some of the stores that I would shop in as a kid to have them test out the product and be like, this is where it should be in the store. Or if we put it on like this type of peg with a display, it does better, and testing a little bit of that first as well.
So, what your strategy always to go to retail even from launch with this
Yeah, I think
product?
eventually we always wanted to be a retail business. And I think it's pretty easy for some people to know based on the type of product that they're offering, whether they're a retail business or not. Specifically in our case, our product is $20. So lower barrier to entry. And it's a very emotional and for sometimes a lot of people an impulse purchase. So for example, they may be in a store, they're on their way to a hiking trip, they're on a road trip, they see a TiCK MiTT, they buy it. Or, they found a tick on their dog a few days ago and now they're seeing the TiCK MiTT in stores and they're buying it. Kind of like bug spray. Like you probably aren't going on Amazon necessarily and buying bug spray. You're like driving to your local CVS and buying bug spray. I just feel like our category is a little bit more tangible and people want to see the product or buy it more last minute. Like they'll buy it the day that they need it sometimes rather than pre-planning. And so because of that, we needed to be in retail.
Yeah, so they don't want to buy it online and then have to wait a week or a
Yep.
couple of days until they
Yep.
get it. So, what was your retail strategy, and what retailer did you get into first?
Yeah, so we started on our own website, which was going well. Then about 6 months into just our company being on our website, we went on Amazon, and that's another area that we really started to blow up in. And so Amazon now is a huge portion of our business too. And then we started shifting into retail. So in the beginning, we were probably in, a few stores, maybe 20 that were in our area that we had personally gone into those stores. And we would try kind of every store to see what works because just like bug spray, our product could really sit in any type of store. It could sit in a drugstore. It could sit in a hardware store. It could sit in lawn and garden, pet, gift shop. Doesn't matter. People need it. So we are where the people are.
Yeah.
And so we tested that theory. We put it in all different kinds of stores to see what would do well. And what we really found is like it's not necessarily about the type of store, it's about the location of the stores. Are they in an area where people are concerned about ticks, where people are aware of the problem? And then also where does it sit in the stores? Putting it near an impulse section by the register leads to a lot more sales than necessarily putting it in the back with like the hunting stuff. But it also really can accompany bug spray or can accompany other pet flea and tick products such as like a topical, a collar, and oral medication. And so for some of our smaller retailers, they were putting it in multiple areas of the store to try to figure out what would do best. But then we started going to trade shows. I think the first like big trade show we ever went to was Global Pet Expo. I don't know if you've ever been there,
No.
but it is a huge trade show in Orlando. I'll be going back for my third time in March,
Oh,
and
wow.
there's a few things that I love about it. One, just the pet community is so open, so helpful, kind. You have dogs walking around the trade show. And it's just, it's fun. You're going to see like cool colors everywhere, innovative stuff happening, cool interactions and activations. But we were shocked. We were like, we are in a 10 by 10 square booth with a banner that I bought on Vistaprint and like a little sign. And we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. And I couldn't tell you how big this trade show is, but it's
Massive.
it was overwhelming walking into that place where you have, Purina has a 20 by 20 square foot and they've built a barn in there and like crazy stuff. People have spent, $250,000 on their booths, these bigger companies. So we were like, I
Right.
don't know what we're doing here. I think the first day we were there, we had the buyers of Chewy stop by and
Oh,
we were
wow.
like, okay, we're on to something. People think this is interesting. And like, we're not doing that much to make a huge splash at this trade show. We had no idea going into it what it was going to be like. But, I feel like we just kept getting more and more validation that we were creating something unique and that we were creating something important. And so from there, we started to onboard with Chewy, and then we were also branching out into more independent stores through distribution. I think as a small company, it is really important in many ways to start with independence, whether you do that sales in-house, whether you do it through a sales rep, or whether you do it through a distributor. I think that people really resonate with what's happening in small businesses, but I also think there's a lot less on the line in terms of the financial requirements than, launching in a massive store. And also, launching in a massive store means you need to be tracking sell-through because they're buying so much inventory. You need to be doing marketing campaigns that aren't just related to online, that are actually drawing people into the store. And so I think that launching an independent is a really good opportunity to learn a lot and try smaller things that then you could potentially scale when you eventually launch into bigger stores.
Yeah. What I think is key, what you were saying too, is just how you were starting in those local stores and they gave you the ability to test it out in different areas to determine like what the right placement is. And when you go to bigger retailers off the bat, they're more directional. They say this is where it's going to be versus you having some historical data to then bring to those stores once you get there to say, hey, it works best here or at the impulse or whatever that is in regards to, the positive data that you already saw in those local stores. So I think too, to your product and just being so innovative and different, it allows you to test out so many different factors to find the right way to go to retail.
Yeah, and even, well before we were in any larger chain, the feedback that we were getting from buyers is, I don't know where to put you in the store. And so we would say, okay, well, we've been tried out in a number of different areas. We know that we work in pet stores. We know that we work in outdoor stores. Obviously, what works best for us but may not work at scale is when the people in the store love our product and they talk about it to the customers and they're willing to put it in front of impulse, which we do still have a lot of independents who do that, and they sell more than anyone. Really being able to provide some direction. When I'm in a store, let's say like an outdoor store, but they have a pet area, they have a hunting area, they have an impulse section, they maybe even have like a gardening glove department. I really push them to put it near the bug spray because that's what I believe is going to most resonate with their customers. And it just depends. Like in a pet store, they don't have a bug spray section. They have a flea and tick section. So I really had to learn about all of those nuances of my category, which feels niche, but in retail, it's really not. It could be anywhere.
Yeah. How did you convince those early retailers to take a chance and put your product in their store?
Yeah, I think that part of it is being relentless, walking in every week or every other week, forming relationships. But I also think when you walk in with something really unique and you're able to demonstrate that same type of emotional reaction that people are having online to a buyer, it is really profound. And so my strategy now, and what I started doing relatively early in the beginning, is I show every buyer the viral videos. And I also, when I go to trade shows, I have a monitor with B-roll playing, and people will come in and they'll watch the video. And sometimes I don't even need to explain the product to them. They get it because they're seeing it in action. And that's like, kind of a give and take of my product is I can't fly ticks on a plane to Orlando and bring them into a convention center like it's a health hazard. It's
Right.
not like I own a chip company and I can sample all day, but I can show video, and video is powerful.
That's so smart. I love that idea. I think that's great for people to hear too, that have that same where it's not something that's tangible somebody can eat or touch, but you can show the experience and get kind of the emotional attachment from that video.
Yeah, and so there were so many times where I walked into a store and I would show that video and the buyer would be like, "Okay, let me take 12 and see how it goes." And if it goes well after that, they just end up being a repeat buyer for you. And so, we were able to kind of share some of that information with these early distributors that we started working with. We created really great relationships at trade shows. We would always befriend the people next to us. I would always walk the trade show and talk to companies that were a little bit older than us, or ones that I felt really resonated with our brand or that I looked up to what they were doing on social media. And I would ask for advice. I think that's a huge thing in retail, is that genuinely a lot of like sales reps, national account people, especially if they don't have a direct competitor, which for us, we don't have. There's not another TiCK MiTT on the market.
Right.
People will offer you advice, and people are kind. I always say your network is your net worth, and I think that is incredibly important in CPG. And so I was able to get a lot of really great recommendations of sales reps, of brokers, at least in the beginning, to help us navigate some of these things that are difficult. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but if you've ever looked at like an onboarding spreadsheet for a distributor or a retailer, it is absolutely terrifying. If you've never done one before, it's going to take someone who has to help you get through it, and a lot of questions and a lot of time. And I've been doing them for 2.5 years now, and I still struggle with them. They're really hard. And so I think at least finding one person in your back pocket who can kind of teach you those things. It's kind of like the same thing as bringing on an advisor or an investor. We don't have one of those. We don't have someone directly on our team who's worked in CPD before. And so, if I have to give someone 10% of commission who's going to open doors for me, explain to me how to do these things, set me up for success, I feel like that's worth it in some cases, especially in the beginning.
Yeah, it's trading money for time, right?
Yeah.
So with that, as you were kind of getting with distributors, getting an opportunity to get in other retailers, how were you able to scale up from a manufacturing standpoint to make sure you had the right inventory and enough inventory to support that?
Yeah, inventory has been a challenge for us. I think it's a challenge for a lot of people right now, especially with the tariff situation. For reference, in the beginning, our factory would only do a minimum order run of 10,000 units, which feels like a lot. But about, I think it was 2 to 3 months after we launched, we were able to get a spot on one of Good Morning America's Deals and Steals segments, and we sold 8,000 units in 6 hours.
What?
So, yeah. So
Oh
after
my
that happened, we were like, okay, 10,000 is definitely not enough. We were like, we definitely have something here. We need
Wow,
to
that's
ramp up
amazing.
inventory. And so we started slowly ramping up. We would, buy 10,000 again, and then we would buy 20. And, I have a boat of 100,000 units now about to hit my warehouse because we've sold over 100,000 units this year. And so, really ramping up. But I think, as you ramp up with inventory, you're going to deal with challenges, especially in this world. We haven't talked about this yet, but we were on Shark Tank back in
Yep.
May. And that was a little bit after Donald Trump had put in the tariffs for China, which I believe were raised for roughly 2 weeks to 145%. And so in April, we had gone viral on social media. We had 2 or 3 videos that reached like 10, 12, 15 million views. So we were already selling out of inventory before our Shark Tank episode appeared. We had ordered more inventory in anticipation of Shark Tank. And when our episode was airing, within like an hour or 2 after our episode had aired, we had run out of inventory of what we had in our warehouse. But we had decided to have a bunch of inventory sit in customs in the US and not accept it. And we had emailed all of the customers whose inventory we couldn't fulfill and said, we really appreciate you supporting us, especially during Shark Tank. You know, we've had thousands of orders come in. As you know, every small business is currently dealing with the tariff issue. The last thing we want to do is pass on this cost to you. So would you kindly be willing to wait 2 weeks for your product? And if after that, we'll eat the cost for you, but we really believe that these tariffs are going to come down. And almost every single person came back to us, said that they understood. And that's what happened. We ended up getting inventory in about 2 weeks after we had aired. I sat on the floor of my parents' home for 48 hours straight, crying over poly mailers, trying to pack all of this stuff. Because at this time we were fulfilling every order ourselves. It's so funny. I asked ChatGPT to describe my life. And they were like, you would say that entrepreneurship is like 10% grit and 90% crying over poly mailers. It's true. And that's very much about being a part of a small business. But yeah, so that happened. We also had like a few thousand units that got lost or stuck in customs that ended up getting sent back to China and then back to the US. So everyone is going to have shipping problems, tariff problems, inventory problems. I think it's really just about like communicating that with your customer, anticipating that something is going to go wrong and trying your best to forecast. And I think now being in business for over 2 years, we're able to forecast a little bit better because we have data. When you have no data, you're just guessing. I had a professor who used to say that there's wags and there's swags. So wags are wild ass guesses and swags are scientific wild ass guesses. And so when you can turn your wags into swags, it's key. It's so important.
That's hilarious. I've definitely heard of swag, but I have not heard of wags. So the manufacturer that you were using, they were able to scale up for you? You didn't have to source another manufacturer to get to those higher quantities?
Yeah, they were able to scale up for us, which has been great. They've been a wonderful partner to us. We, launched new colors with them. Eventually, we started creating bilingual packaging with them so that we could have product in Canada as well, because we were getting so much demand requests for Canada. So, they've been great. And now we're starting to work on some new products and have been able to find some manufacturers to support those products because every manufacturer has a particular type of material they might work with. So if you're moving from like fabric to liquid or to metal or to plastic, typically you need to find someone else. So we've been able to find some people, and there are some really great manufacturing reps out there who are the people that will go to China and have those meetings in person and stay up until 2 a.m. and are doing so much inventory, not just with your company but with other companies too, that allow them to get better rates. And so finding people like that has been amazing.
Great. So you talked a bit about Shark Tank, so let's get into that.
Yes.
So how did you end up on last season's Shark Tank?
Oh, this is a long story. So, I grew up watching Shark Tank, like I think every young person who has any willingness to potentially be an entrepreneur, or if they just like business or reality TV. Grew up watching Shark Tank. I wasn't really sure if it would be the right fit for us. I knew a few people who had been on the show. I went to college with them, or I had met them through the CPG group, or they had been at like trade shows I had gone to, and everyone always talked about how it was such an amazing experience and the benefit that it had to their business. And so I had a friend who had asked to be on the show before, but she had a SaaS company and she didn't feel like she was the right fit for the show. And so she told the producers that they should talk to us instead, which was incredibly kind of her. And so that was a bit of a unique path. I think a lot of people that I know end up going to the casting, but we're able to get in touch with the producers and go through that process from there. And it's one of the craziest things, but I actually got engaged 3 days before I filmed my episode. So that was the craziest week of my life. My fiance proposed to me, which he had to tell the producers he was doing because he moved my tape date to propose.
Oh, really?
And he proposed to me on a Saturday. Sunday morning, I got on a call with the producers. They were like, "Congratulations, let's see the ring." Monday, I flew to LA. Tuesday, I filmed my episode. Wednesday, I was back in New York.
Oh my gosh.
You film and you don't know if you're going to air. There's no guarantee. It's a shot in the dark. You do your absolute best and hope that you've, showed enough personality and that it went well enough with the Sharks and that you're just the right fit for their season to eventually air their episode. And we ended up being on the season finale, so I had to wait longer than anyone to find out if my episode was going to air or not.
Oh, you mean they don't even give you a preview? You're like just waiting every week to see if you're actually going to be on there?
I believe they told us about a month and a half before.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, it probably varies per season, but I was told about a month and a half before that we were going to air on the season finale. I filmed my episode in September. They had already started their season in September, and so I figured it was going to be a while, but then time just kept going on and on. And when we finally got the call that we were going to be on the season finale, it's like, I would have rather, I'm so glad that I waited and got that call,
Yeah.
And it was actually Mark Cuban's last episode ever. So that was really exciting, and I'm happy I got to be a part of that.
Awesome. How did you prepare for that pitch? So it's a little bit different than the pitches you were doing walking into stores.
Yeah. You watch a lot of Shark Tank, honestly. I think I watched like 5 seasons in order to prepare for my own episode. I think you never know what kinds of questions they're going to ask, and you just learn by watching the show, and you see patterns of like, okay, they ask everyone how much it costs to make and how much they're selling it for. Like that's Mark Cuban's like number one question. And so you start writing the questions down that you see in every episode, or if I have a similar product, what are the questions that I'm seeing those people ask? And we would just practice. And I went on the show with my dad, and we kind of decided, okay, this is who would answer this type of question. This is who would answer that type of question. And, I was really focused on a lot of the marketing of the company, and also had a very strong understanding of the problem that we were solving and knew absolutely everything about ticks. I'm actually reading this book right now. I think it's called Ramping Your Brand. It just came out. And one of the things that he talks about it is you should know more about your category to the point where you could embarrass a buyer. And so if I'm like talking to a buyer and they're like, "Oh, like ticks are a problem, right? Like you could get Lyme disease." And I'm like, "Well, actually 1 in 10 people get bit by a tick every year, and there are over 500,000 cases of Lyme disease every year, and there's this new case, a new, illness called alpha-gal and blah 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 blah."
Yeah.
And they're like, "Why do you know that?" I'm like, "Because I'm educated on my category." So I knew all of the tick stuff, and I think at one point, like Mr. Wonderful called me the tick queen. You can watch it on Hulu. But and I would take all of that, because there were a lot of questions from them as to like, okay, how do people get Lyme disease, and why do you need a glove to prevent the tick, and is it okay if the tick is crawling on you? All of those types of things that I was able to answer. And my dad, I was like, you take the numbers. You're a numbers guy. I can read an Excel spreadsheet, but he does very good mental math and all of those types of things. So he would answer those questions, and you ideally talk to other people who have been experienced the show and see what they may be able to help you with. Yeah, it's a lot of like sitting in your living room late at night practicing your pitch, the opening pitch. I think I could still recite it a year and a half later. So there's a lot that you can prepare for, but I would say, I tell people being on Shark Tank is like jumping out of a plane. It is absolutely terrifying. It is incredibly exhilarating. And at the end, you're just like relieved, but it's a once in a lifetime experience for sure.
And you had that, it sounds like, from what you were describing earlier, that kind of Shark Tank effect from sales post the post the episode launch. Which
Yeah.
is interesting that they only tell you a month and a half, because I feel like that's not a lot of time to build inventory to get ready for something like that.
No. No. I think they might have even given us more time potentially because obviously there was the tariff issue at that time. And so everyone was kind of freaking out. So I don't know if, they typically tell people that far in advance or if they had, lovingly given us a little bit more time due to the situation. But yeah, yeah. It's a quick turnaround and you just hope and pray that you'll be selected and you try your best to prepare.
Yeah. I love too that you were transparent and open with the people that were buying your product in regards to the inventory situation, and that they weren't just sitting around waiting for 2 weeks without any sort of information as to what was going on. Helps you to
Yeah.
kind of retain that consumer. So you talked a
Yeah.
second about your dad, and he's the co-founder of the brand, correct?
Yeah.
How do you separate your responsibilities in the
hmm
business?
Yeah, so my dad is a serial entrepreneur. He's been in a number of different businesses before, but never in CPG. And so he has a unique skill set of, dealing with a startup and a couple of things that are very valuable. But he sold his business back in 2021, and I think he low-key thought he was retiring. And I was like, we're not retiring. You're coming out of retirement. We're going to do TiCK MiTT together. It's going to be great. And so, he willingly came out of retirement, but he functions, like he's an advisor. He's a part-time employee, and he has really critical roles, but he is not, staying up until 10 p.m. like a regular, serial entrepreneur, like founder. That's my responsibility.
Okay.
But he brings unique skill sets. He is really amazing with documents, legal, negotiation, and looking over all of those things. He's very skilled at financials. That's something that, we work on a lot together. And he actually does a lot of our product development. He is a bit of an inventor. He loves engineering. I think in another life, he would have been an engineer. And so like figuring out the manufacturing process and coming up with ideas of new products. And that's like what he loves about being a part of our business. And so he really spearheads that. And I act as the CEO. And, if there's, a big call to make, he's always doing that with me. But, especially in the beginning, I leaned on him a lot more, and I've become so much more confident in figuring out how to do things myself. And I think that's obviously what a father wants for their child, is
Yeah.
to see them grow. And I think he loves doing this with me. And, we go to trade shows together sometimes. And, it's just fun. It's fun. And it's fun for him because he gets to see, a company that he loves and me both flourish. And he gets to make some money, and he doesn't have to work like a crazy entrepreneur person, but he offers such unique skills. And I think that we balance each other out a lot. I think I bring more of like the marketing to the table. Obviously, he doesn't know that much about social media, even though he sends me reels all day long. And so there we go hand in hand. We go
Yeah.
hand in hand. And I think that even now, just based on where I sit within the business, is I'm teaching him things about, the CPG industry specifically that he didn't know. It's like, okay, most CPG founders spend like 15 to 20% of their sales on marketing. And, for his previous industries, like that number is astronomical. That makes no sense. And so, it's like you have unique skill sets, but every industry is different. And so he's learned a lot being in CPG as well.
That's great too that he like respects what you're bringing to the table, and like you educating him, because from a father to a daughter, it's usually the opposite, right? In regards to development and learning and things like that.
I mean, when you go into business with someone, whether or not that's your father, you're in a partnership and you have to have mutual respect. And, I always believe that I think it's like Dale Carnegie. He says that 90% of learning is teaching others. And I truly believe that. And I think that, if you're able to articulate something to someone else well, you're going to remember it
That's
also,
true.
and you're going to
Yeah.
have a much better confidence that you understand how to do the thing that you just articulated. So, me teaching him is also a learning opportunity for me, and he'll ask questions and I'll be like, "Oh, I know that, but I don't know that. Maybe I need to go look into that." So, there's a lot of great things that come with it.
Yeah, helps you build some confidence too, because you're like, "Oh, I know that."
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what does the team look like today as you've kind of expanded into more retail?
Yeah, so we've definitely grown our team. It's interesting, and I think this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs will tell you is that when you're growing a company, there's growing pains regularly. Maybe it's every 3 to 6 months you should be taking a step back and figuring out, are all of the responsibilities or typical things on my to-do list still serving me with where the business is at? So, maybe it's like I was doing all of some of those Excel spreadsheets that we were talking about before, or I was physically going into stores to sell, or I was the one posting on social media. And as the business grows, is that still what is the best use of my time?
Right.
Or do I need to bring on someone who maybe has more expertise in a particular area so I can go learn something new that needs to now be done? So I think, it's an endless part of learning something new, figuring out if is that still what I should be doing to help my business grow. And so you have me, you have my dad, who we already talked about, who works part-time. And then I brought on a full-time marketing person. I love marketing. I love strategizing. I love thinking about the overall messaging, but I don't know how to do Facebook ads or Google ads. I don't know how to build like a Replo landing page. I don't always know what's going to go viral on social media or how to deal with like influencers, UGC, all of those things. Nor did I feel like I could execute half of those things well while still doing all the other things that the business needed from me. So we brought on a full-time person to help with social media, and she's amazing. She's like my right hand. And then we brought on about 6 months ago an operations person, and we did this for a couple of reasons. We ran the numbers, and we were first, we had a 3PL because it was required for us from Good Morning America for the Deals and Steals specifically to have a 3PL. So we had that 3PL for a while. But then we were also still fulfilling all of the orders, either myself, my family. I would like hire my kids I used to babysit to come in and pack orders for me. I turned my childhood bedroom into a warehouse. There were 4,000 TiCK MiTTs in there.
Oh my gosh.
So it got crazy. And so we decided that we were running the numbers, and based on our product, which is a $20 product, it didn't make sense to have a 3PL, because when you have a 3PL, they're charging you for picking, packing of, an order, and for each individual unit that goes into that order, obviously plus shipping. And so it would actually be cheaper for us to, based on the amount of volume we were doing, to pay for a warehouse and a full-time employee whose part of their responsibility would be to pack orders. And so that's what we decided to do. So about 3 months ago, we got our own warehouse. 6 months ago, I hired someone who would be helping us pack orders, and then for like larger shipments could get a part-time person to come in here and there to help. So she does that. And then in addition to that, she's really helping out with some of those retail Excel spreadsheets, implementing new software, dealing with things like sales tax, helping out a little bit with like trade shows. She does our customer service. So, especially when you're a small business, it's kind of like you are given a title, but that doesn't necessarily mean that title is your job description. It's a very much about like willingness to wear many hats. And I do that as a founder. It's like one day, this morning, I'm, making content for our website and our social. And then 2 hours later, I'm on the phone with my PR team. And then an hour after that, I'm talking to our manufacturing reps. And then I'm looking at, sales tax and accounting. And those are all things I did today. So, you know,
Like 5
and
different
so
jobs.
I did all. I'm literally not kidding. I worked on all
Wow.
5 of those things today. And so, you have to be willing to do a lot of different kinds of things. And the beauty of working at a startup and being an entrepreneur is that you're constantly growing. Your job description is changing. And I'm also someone who very much believes that if my employees enjoy what they're working on, they're going to do a better job on it. And so, every few months I'll check in, with my marketing person, and I'll be like, what are you really enjoying about your job right now? And she'll be like, I love the Facebook and the Google ads. I love the overarching strategy. I love going when we have content days and we shoot all day. But like, I'm really struggling with the physical editing of the content creation. And I'm struggling with the graphics. And I'm like, great, let's go get an intern from my university who will work for college credit. That's a great thing for people to do, is get interns working for college credit. I usually have 3 at a time. It's amazing.
Oh, that's
And
smart.
let's have someone who will do that, because you're not enjoying that. And so you're not going to do it well. And it's not a good use of your time. And so we'll find someone who will take that over for you.
That's really smart. I think also just what you were saying in regards to evaluating every, 3 to 6 months. Is what I'm doing the right thing to grow the business? And do I need somebody else to come in, and having those checkpoints versus being bogged down with so much and not being able to elevate because you have so many roles of responsibility that you're trying to work through.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing, and very much like a trap for small business owners, is that, they never graduate out of being the person to pack every order, or they never graduate from being the person to walking into every single store, or they don't graduate from being the person who's fulfilling those customer service calls. And so if you don't have time to scale, you're not going to scale. And so eventually, when you're seeing that you're at certain inflection points, or you're feeling bogged down by things that didn't used to make you feel that way, you need to step back and make a change.
Yeah. Was that hard to let go when you were pretty much doing everything across all areas of the business?
Yeah, I mean, it is hard to let go. I think there are a few things. I think, first of all, is that when you let some of those things go, now you have opportunity to try new things, which is
Mm.
exciting. And I still think that some of those, such as like face-to-face time with your consumers or packing an order, like those are still things that you should try, like be a part of every now and then. I still will like have a small little event with 30 people. Like, we had a dog walk, we had all of these people with dogs come, and there were pup cups, and we talked about TiCK MiTT, and we learned what their concerns are with tick-borne disease. And so, like, as the founder, you can't completely pull yourself away from those smaller things, because at the end of the day, those small things matter,
Yeah.
and they're going to inform you as to how people feel about your brand, how people feel about your company, how you're presenting yourself. I mean, if I went a year and never packed an order, and then all of a sudden I'm like, well, this is a horrible poly mailer we're using. It's not branded. We're not including any information in the card, then I've just lost that whole opportunity. And so I think, you have to grow, and then, just be willing to revisit those roots. You're never, they never don't become your responsibility ever anymore. It's your baby.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you have
So
to
be
protect
open
it.
be open to release, but still be connected, basically.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and just take time every once in a while to connect back to those things that you used to do.
Yeah. So what is next? What's the future for TiCK MiTT?
Yeah, so we have a lot of exciting things happening. We are coming out with a new product around the end of January, early February, which is really exciting because up until now, we've only ever had new color launches, or we made a kids version of our TiCK MiTT. So this is a completely new
Oh,
product
cute.
that we're really excited about, but will still aid people in protecting themselves and their family from ticks, which really is our mission at our core. And then we have a lot of really big, exciting retail launches in Q2. So, continue just to check us out on social media, and there's going to be some new places where you can find TiCK MiTT, maybe even some exclusives in stores that you can only get in certain
Exciting.
stores that are not online. Yeah, so we're really excited and busy.
Yeah. So, where can our followers listen, become educated, learn, and of course, buy TiCK MiTT?
Yeah, so you can buy TiCK MiTT and learn more about tick-borne disease and a number of different things on tickmitt.com. And we are at tick.mitt across all socials. So Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Olivia. I really enjoyed you being on the show and just talking about TiCK MiTT and educating us, and also just really dropping some really amazing gems I think other founders are definitely going to take note and utilize as they're building their retail strategy.
Thank you so much, Roberta, for having me.
Yeah, thank you.